Please be seated. Welcome to this meeting of full council, and if I could ask first that the webcasting introduction be read out.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing or other such use by third parties. If you're seated in the lower public seating area, it is likely that the recording cameras will capture your image, and this will result in the possibility that your image will become part of the broadcast. This may infringe your human and data protection rights, and if you wish to avoid this, you should move to the upper public gallery. And could I also please remind all members to switch off their microphone when they finish speaking. Thank you.
Thank you. And apologies for absence.
Yes, Chairman, we have apologies from Councillors Bassett, Barnott, Hadley, Bob Jennings, Judy Jennings and Michael Owen.
Thank you. And any declarations of interest? No. Thank you. And minutes of the last meeting you will have found on pages 7 to 36. Are you happy to approve these as a correct record? Thank you. And now we move on to item 5, which is announcements. And very sadly, the first announcement I have to make is to report the passing of Councillor Brian Rolfe, who was the councillor for Lambourne Ward. And I would ask first that we stand for 1 minute's silence in memory of Brian. Thank you, members. Please be seated. And if I may just start by saying that I know that there are some of you who wish to say a few words about Brian this evening, but I'm going to use Chairman's privilege and say something myself first. I have found it extremely difficult to know where to start when talking about Brian. Firstly, I must say how deeply saddened I was when I received a message on Saturday to let me know that he had died. Even now, I'm finding it hard to take on board that I will not be seeing him again sitting in the back row on my right, where he has sat at full council for several years. I didn't really meet Brian until he was elected to represent the Lambourne Ward in May 2007. Over the years, I've sat on many committees with him and have got to know him well. He was so easy to talk to and took a real interest in other people. He was a true gentleman in every sense of the word and had an enigmatic smile which I can still see when I think about him. I had the privilege to serve as Vice Chairman in the year 2012-13 when Brian was Chairman of Council. It was a year when both my husband and I got to know Brian and his wife Una well. We thoroughly enjoyed our weekly meetings with Pat Seeger, sorting out who was going to do what, where and when. I, I know that Brian was a great representative of this council during that year. But in representing us, not only be it representing us in the wider county of Essex, or attending groups and organisations within the district itself. He had the ability to meet with people and put them at their ease. And I know that he was proud to have been able to represent this council in that way. I am going to miss the periodic phone calls where if I didn't get to the handset quickly enough, I would have to loiter while Brian and my husband John discussed the fortunes of Arsenal and also put the world to rights. Brian was very much a family man, and our thoughts must be with his wife Una, their daughters and their families. I could say a lot more, but I will now pass over to others who I know wish to contribute their own thoughts and memories of Brian. And if I can go first to Councillor Chris Whitbread.
Thank you, Chairman, and that was a beautiful tribute that really caught the essence of who Brian really was. First and foremost, Brian to me was a good friend who was always loyal to you, would stand by you, whatever was going on. He could also be insightful and very truthful to you, and he was highly principled, and some of that never got shown in this chamber, but Brian was one of those people who would tell you as it was when he had to, and very firm in that regard. I first met Brian when he was campaigning to become a town councillor. I saw him rise to being town mayor of Epping, probably one of the best mayors that Epping has ever had. He was first class, and of course at that time you really saw Brian the community councillor, someone who cared passionately about the community that he served and would do anything for it. And the tribute there is that even at Christmas this year, Brian was out there in the freezing cold at Carol's on the Green with the Rotarians serving the local community. In fact, Holly and myself had one of our long conversations when he should have been shaking the bucket. He was chatting to us about the issues of the day, and that's one of the lovely things about Brian. He used to call into my high street offices, and we just used to kill time for ages and ages and ages, talking about everything and nothing, and always having a laugh at each other's expense as we sat there. I would wind him up so in the days when Chelsea could win football matches about the fortunes of Arsenal, and last time we spoke he was winding me up about the fortunes of Chelsea. So what goes around comes around. But and then of course I saw Brian into becoming a district councillor for Abridge when Steve Metcalfe stood down, and he was brilliant again. He really settled into that role of working hard for Abridge and really delivering for the people down there. And he cared passionately. He worried about every detail of serving the village. And it told, you know, if there was a planning application or a housing issue, I know he'd spend hours on the phone to Holly about housing issues, and he passionately cared about people. And I think that's what really comes across. So not only have I lost a good friend, a brilliant district councillor, but the community has lost someone really special. And I'm sad. I'm not sad because I knew Brian and I knew him well. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Caroline Pond.
Thank you, Chairman. I was very sorry to hear from the Chairman about the death of Brian. The LRA group send our condolences to Una and the family. Chris and I first met Brian when he was Mayor of Epping, and he had a reception there in the Town Council Hall. As has been said, he was very friendly to us all, committed to Epping and his ward of Lambourne. He enjoyed being on Epping Forest District Council and enjoyed being a portfolio holder for a while. And he was still active, very active, on the council and committees. Brian was a Loughton lad, as he often told us, born in Woodland Road in 1936, and he went to Staples Road School. So he could have been still there and the councillor for us. Anyway, so Brian was, a good chap, and we will all miss him. And thank you, Brian. You were a wonderful example of a ward councillor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor John Whitehouse. Oh, Councillor Pond.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I was very sorry to hear the news when it was circulated. My thoughts with Una and the family. I knew Brian as on Epping Town Council and on this council, particularly sitting on the planning committee alongside him, where he was fierce in the defence and pursuit of issues he felt strongly about. He was always someone who would take time to say hello and talk. So I was very sorry to hear the news, and I agree with everything that other members have said tonight.
Thank you. I've got one or two other people who've indicated they would like to say a few words. So if I can go to Councillor Richard Morgan.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, we're all very sad to hear the news on Saturday of Brian's passing. He was an excellent councillor for Lambourne. At our planning meetings, he always fought his corner for the best deal he could with the planning officers and for his ward. He not only was a good councillor, he was a great friend. As the chairman, leader said, he used to sit next to me here at the council meetings, and we used to, when it got to the financial bit of the council, neither of us understood it very well, and we used to say, what's happening? Well, we'll let them get on with it. But he was a great friend, and I will really miss him, especially sitting here next to me, and we'll send our condolences to you and the family. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McIver.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm deeply saddened to learn of the passing of a first-class councillor. I think that's the only way I can describe Councillor Rolfe. And I first met Councillor Rolfe as a youth councillor. In fact, I remember I was actually sitting here and he was standing there. The important man with the chains was because I didn't quite know what a chairman and vice chairman was back then. And I got to know Brian very well through his role as Councillor Chris Whitbread quite rightly said, as a community councillor. Everywhere you went, Councillor Rolfe was there, and that's not just in his time as chairman, but just as a ward councillor too. And I distinctively remember, and I think this is how I will remember Councillor Rolfe, a photo of him with the chains on, putting up the Christmas lights. That to me is what Councillor Rolfe was all about, community first. And I later got to know Councillor Rolfe better as a district councillor. There's not many district councillors that I think can encourage colleagues to stand up and send a laurel bush to DDMC, but Councillor Rolfe had a way of doing that. And I think there was 3 ways you could sum up what Councillor Rolfe was thinking when you spoke, because you either got a thumbs up, a wink, or a big head shake. And I will always remember the looks that you would get at the end of the meeting if he was unhappy, or the other way round too. But as the county councillor for Abridge and Lambourne, I got to see Councillor Rolfe in his ward, where he really was at his best. And I have such fond memories of Councillor Rolfe in the community of Abridge, and he was just always around. And I know that the people of Abridge have suffered 2 great losses recently, with the passing also of Councillor Rolfe's dear friend, John Philby. And I think it's quite right that as a council we take a moment to, of course, send our condolences to Una and the Rolfe family, but I'd also like to take a moment to think about the people of Abridge and Lambourne who have suffered 2 great losses to their community. And I know that as a council we will be there for the charm of this district, which is Abridge, and the people there are also very much in our thoughts. And Madam Chairman, I just would like to say that Councillor Rolfe, for me, will be remembered as an exemplar of what a councillor should be. But as quite rightly said by so many colleagues in here today, Councillor Rolfe, above all, was a dear, loyal friend, and he always said it how it was, and I'll remember him for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Holly Whitbread.
Thank you, Chairman. And I don't think there's too much more that I can say this evening, because there's been so many lovely tributes to Brian. But Brian was a good friend of mine, and what I would say is about his dedication and how much he would do, not just turn up to meetings, and he did turn up to every single meeting. He was brilliant like that, and I know he was at the parish council meeting only a couple of days ago. So Brian was not only dedicated, but he cared so much about his ward, and many people tonight have actually mentioned Brian's really long phone calls. So I'd often, particularly in the pandemic actually, I'd look at the phone and think, I've spoken to Brian for 2.5 hours. He's supposed to be working, and we would just go round and round in circles. And it's probably not appropriate to talk about the details of it tonight, but another thing about Brian, which he was a brilliant community councillor, but he was also incredibly political. And I've never met someone who enjoyed campaigning and winding up, and I won't say the word opposition because it's a pleasant evening, but winding up the other side during elections. But I would just like to finish my remarks tonight on remembering Christmas Eve this year, where I spoke to Brian for quite some time when he should have been shaking his bucket on the green in Epping, yet again shown his dedication, but his wicked sense of humour, how he cared about community, and what a great man he was. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mead, you wish to say something? Oh,
Sorry.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. So I just wanted to say that I was really sorry to hear about the passing of Councillor Rolfe, because so I wanted to say a few words about working with him. So he was one of the very few councillors on the other side of the chamber who, during my nervous first term in 2014, made me feel utterly welcome. And I will always remember how kind he was to me then. I also remember serving with him on one of my first committees, which was housing appeals, and I was really nervous and worried that that being new and being perhaps considered as a softie social worker, my views would be taken into account. But I needn't have worried, as Councillor Rolfe completely listened to me, and he did appreciate my experience. And I remember on one memorable occasion, we had a particularly upsetting case, and I had tears in my eyes, and I was desperate to compose myself. And Councillor Rolfe saw, and he understood, and he also had a tear. So he made me feel like it was okay not to be perfectly polished when talking at meetings, because he said he wasn't either. And he had humility, and he cared, and he had no sides to him, and such a sense of humour as well. So I will miss him and will remember him, and I'm thinking of his family at this very sad time.
Thank you. And Councillor Phillip?
Thank you, Chairman. I'll do my best not to repeat anything that's been said so far, although there is one extract from your own tribute that I do have to echo. I'll come to that at the end. I do remember, I find it very difficult to talk about Councillor Rolfe. He was Brian to me, and he wanted to be Brian to people. He really did care for people. I remember when I joined the council in 2008, he was one of the first people to really take an interest in me, partly because he used to live in Thaden, and he kept coming back to what was going on in Thaden now. Is that butcher still open? How's the meat there? How are the pubs doing? He was always interested in Thaden, and for that I appreciate it. And of course, he was just down the road from me in Abridge in terms of his ward, so we worked very closely together a lot of the time, and he used to frequently ask me questions about planning. Can we do this? Is this the right thing to do? Is there something wrong with that? Am I right to do this? He was always very keen to make sure that he actually got things right. He didn't want to do things wrong. And in that way, he was really a great councillor. Interesting to hear what Councillor Whitbread was saying in terms of him wanting to get out campaigning, because one of my cherished memories of Brian is sitting outside his house when we should have been out campaigning in the sun and drinking coffee before we actually got going. Because that was him as well as wanting to get going, he wanted to be friendly. But when I heard the sad news, one of the first things I had to do was to contact my ex-ward colleague and ex-councillor Jones. She's known Brian basically since she was knee-high. He had been a real influence on her. She served on planning committees with him as chair and vice chair and really valued the work that he put in. I asked Sue, what's the one thing you'd like me to say at full council about Councillor Roth? She said, he was a true gentleman. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Murray? Yeah, no?
No, I hadn't
No,
indicated.
sorry. Nobody else? Oh, sorry, Councillor Bedford.
Thank you. I suppose it falls to me at the end here to sort of round up a few memories I've got of Brian. To me, he was a father figure. I can remember joining council in 2015, 2016 time. Brian sort of took you under a wing and sort of, do this lad, do that lad. And I'm thinking, lad, what's this lad bit? And we had a really good rapport, got on well. And there's a couple of things that I think Brian should be remembered for, and that's the dedication to his residents, dragging all of us over to Lambourne to go and look at a hedge and a load of lights. And we were in the car park, and he was arguing the point that you could tell he was black and blue. But I think most of all, I'd like to remember Brian going forward. My condolences to the family, but I do remember Brian. He's more like a Monty Python character to me. He always looked on the brighter side of life. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see anybody else indicating. I have to say that those of you who have spoken this evening, I think you could really truly say that we have all seen the same person in our minds when we were talking about him. And I think that says a lot for somebody these days. So thank you all very much for those comments. And now if we can move on, I'm not going to make any further announcements because we have got a fairly full agenda this evening. So if we move on to any public questions.
No, Chairman.
Thank you. And any questions by members under notice?
No, Chairman.
Thank you. So now item 8 on the agenda, reports from the leader and members of the cabinet. You've got the written reports on pages 37 to 74, but I know that the leader will be giving a verbal report, so we can hand over to Councillor Chris Whitbread.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, February has been a month of meetings in so many ways, covering a range of issues. And last week, for instance, I was in Westminster attending a meeting of East of England leaders, followed by an all-party group looking at levelling up. So obviously making sure that Epping Forest is being heard in all the right places. We've also been actively engaged in the discussions around devolution, whilst it is really mainly the domain of the upper tier authorities who have to agree any devolution ask of government. I do believe it is a way of actually getting more for our county and then hopefully for our districts as well. So I've made sure that Epping Forest is in the core of the discussions around devolution, along with our Chief Executive as well. We've both been actively engaged. On top of that, of course, we know now that the inspector has found our local plan sound, and the important part of that local plan is the Harlow Garden Town communities, and I've been attending board meetings of that this month as well as having my regular meetings with the chairman of that board and of course the managing director to discuss how matters are progressing and making sure that we are looking after the interest of Epping Forest first and foremost as well. So there are a lot of meetings going on at the present time. These are meetings that will shape our place for the future, and of course very, very important that Epping Forest is heard at every level. Of course, I've been attending Essex leaders meetings as well on a variety of issues that are important to us. And of course, once again, we are also talking to Roger Hurst and all the other community leaders that we need to be in touch with for the benefit of Epping Forest. Chairman, I could go further, but of course, my colleagues also attend a number of meetings that I attend and have covered those in their reports.
Thank you. And have any other cabinet members got anything to add to their reports? No. So if we move on to questions by members without notice, I'm looking around for any indication of anybody wishing to ask any questions. Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Chair. My question is to the technical portfolio holder, Councillor Ken Williamson, please. Thank you again for a detailed report, Councillor Williamson. there's something in your report that I have been asked questions about and I felt unable to give the answer. So I was very pleased to see it mentioned, but would welcome a bit more detail. It was about the closure, which has been for many months now, of the path across from, in your section, dangerous structures, Chigwell Lane to Torrington Drive, which was quite a useful path. And I wondered if you could say a bit more, really, about, you know, it's now, as it says in your report, a year, you know, the way forward, really, with this problem.
Thank you. Councillor Williamson?
Try this one. We're on. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the question. I really can't answer that straight away here. I will have a word with officers and get back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Parsons?
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to ask the Cabinet Member for Housing for an update on the work the Council is doing towards both the Council House building programme and also regeneration around the district. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Holly Whitbread?
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to Councillor Parsons for that excellent question. I'm really pleased to give an update on our Council House building and regeneration programme. I'm sure members will be aware through previous Cabinet meetings that we're reviewing our HRA business plan, our housing revenue account business plan to meet the moment. Obviously, we're facing new challenges in terms of the cost of living crisis and the cost of building as a result of inflation due to the war in Ukraine. But where I would reassure Councillor Parsons is we continue to be committed to both Council House building and regeneration. First of all, in terms of regeneration in Harveyfields, in his own ward, we've just seen £114,000 of investment into regenerating the estate there. That includes cleaning up the pathways, the bin areas, and just making it a more pleasant environment for residents to live in. We've seen works begin in Limes Farm, first of all with the BBC funding, which paid for some more pleasant decorations to the estate, but more recently the essential work such as roofs and making sure that properties are really up to scratch, and that's a multi-million-pound investment that we're seeing on the ground there. And Shelley, where I visited with Councillor Bedford just a few days ago, where we're continuing to look at regeneration plans, which will also include shared ownership projects, so we're helping get people onto the property ladder. But what really is key, as well as building new homes for the future, is making sure those that we look after are up to scratch. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McIver?
Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The disruption to our waste collections has been unacceptable recently, and I'd like to thank the officers of this council and indeed members of the Cabinet for doing their absolute best to keep us informed on this, and I'm pleased to see that the backlog has been improved. Would the Leader of the Council like to take this opportunity to update us on what progress has been made, and also thank our residents for their patience?
Thank you. This is to the Leader, is it, as opposed to Councillor Avey?
Chairman, I'm happy to start and then pass to Councillor Avey, and I thank Councillor McIver for the question. It gives me an opportunity to say that I am sorry to residents for the disruption that we've had over the winter months by BIFA. We've had constructive discussions with BIFA, which I think have gone well, and improvements have been made. Our officers have been first class, and I have to say that, and I pay tribute to the work that they've put in to making sure that many issues are addressed as quickly as possible. I also thank our call centre staff as well. They've been inundated during that time and have really put every effort in to trying to resolve issues for residents. That being said, it is annoying, incredibly annoying and frustrating at the problems that we've had, and we are still seeing sporadic problems. I was in Epping Upland on Sunday, I was in other parts of the district over the weekend as well, but there are still patchy collections that need to be improved. Indeed, my waste wasn't collected till Friday this week, but I accept that because these are difficult times. The good thing that we're doing is actually some of what you saw in last week's, 2 weeks ago now, Cabinet agenda, where we're now looking for a place for parking waste lorries. We're starting to make plans for the future, and of course we will be entering at some point a new procurement process, and lessons learned will come from that, and they're coming from that already. But again, I thank Councillor Avey for his work in it, and of course Councillor Phillip as well, because he also goes to the Waste Board, and we have been robust. I won't say more than that, but I think we've been robust. Officers have been robust. In fact, I'd say sometimes our officers have actually been quite angry because they are really trying hard to make sure our residents get the service they deserve, and of course that's foremost of our mind.
Thank you. Councillor Avey, did you want to add anything?
Thank you, Chairman. Just to echo what the leaders said, I think we have seen improvement. I must say my email inbox has become slightly smaller over the last couple of weeks. And indeed, in my area, rubbish has been picked up perfectly. So I can say that I've seen the system working. The leader has talked about the future. Hopefully, bar any bad weather, and we're still in winter, so there could be a last blast of winter to disrupt things. Things are going reasonably well, and we will just have a normal level of issues which we get at any other time in the waste contract. But again, I'd like to thank the officers because they have done an absolutely amazing job. Thank you.
Very much. Councillor Heap.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll try not to fill up your inbox, Councillor Avey. This is for Councillor Phillip. At the last ONS, I made a request that the Chairman of the Board of Quality comes to the Council so that we can all meet him, at least put a face to the money. When will this miracle happen?
Thank you. Councillor Phillip.
As Councillor Heaton knows, I'm not in charge of ONS. There is a straightforward procedure for getting things onto the agenda of overview and scrutiny, using a PIC form and persuading the other members of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee that is something the Overview and Scrutiny Committee wishes to do. That is the way to take things to Overview and Scrutiny, not through the Cabinet.
Thank you very much. You referenced PIC forms. I'll just say in passing, it's perhaps something that has slipped under the parapet a bit recently, and perhaps it's something we need to be reminded about.
Chairman, yes, it's a form by which a couple of people from the Council can make requests for things to go onto agendas to be looked for.
Thank you. Councillor Risby.
Thank you, Chairman. And my question is for the Leader of the Council. So, does the Leader of the Council agree with me that the London Mayor Sadiq Khan's ULEZ charge is a tax without accountability on the residents of Epping Forest? Thank you.
Councillor Whitbread.
Thank you, Chairman. I certainly do. I'm opposed to the ULEZ charges that are being proposed, and I'm opposed to the way it's been done. Indeed, I was welcome that Essex has said they will have no signage for ULEZ on Essex-owned highways land. I think that's a really positive thing to do, and I take the same approach here in Epping Forest.
Thank you. Councillor Chris Pond.
Chairman, thank you. This concern, I'm not sure which portfolio holder it concerns, it may be more than one, but it's a question of the structural refurbishment of the shops and flats in Loughton Broadway. I wonder whether we could have an update on that aspect of the refurbishment. How is it going? What is the likely time scale? And the second part is allied but not directly deriving from that, and that is what is the current state of commercial lettings, both in the Broadway and in the council-owned shops on the western side of Loughton High Road.
Thank you. Just getting an indication of who's going to answer. Councillor Holly Whitbread.
I can answer part on the Broadway, but commercial lettings I think would probably be Councillor Phillip. Obviously, the Broadway and Debden was, along with Limes Farm, our two key projects that we were looking at. I did promise actually that I'd get Councillor Brooks an update on those works at the last ONS, I believe it was. So if it's okay, I'll put an update in the members' briefing. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Phillip?
Thank you, Chairman. With a detailed question or percentages like that, it would be very useful to have some advanced warning. I don't keep those percentages to hand. I know that in the vast majority of our places, everything is either let or nearly let or in the process of being let. But I will do likewise to my colleague and put a full response into the bulletin.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Councillor Barlow? No? I thought you had indicated, but no. Councillor Janet Whitehouse?
Thank you, Chairman. My question is to the portfolio holder for reviews and efficiency, Councillor Burrows. I wonder if you would update us on the current projects that you're involved in and say why you don't provide a report to Council like the other portfolio holders do.
Councillor Burrows?
Thank you, Janet, for that. Actually, there's ongoing various things which I'm involved in. One is the museum, others is grants and things like that. So really, there's nothing much to report because it goes on. I can't give you any more help than that, I'm afraid. That's why. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. If I can rise, and of course Councillor Burrows is quite correct, he deals with the grants, he deals with the museum and a whole range of issues. But remembering much of what Councillor Burrows does is across all our reports, because what he does is integrated in meetings that he attends. He will attend meetings with Councillor Holly Whitbread on a housing issue, or myself with some of my leaders' issues. And so it's more complex than just doing those things. And I think it's really important that members realise that as we go forward.
Thank you. Councillor Amos?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My question is in regard to the DART 87 Plus service. I think we're all aware that, and it is well known, that the usage of buses, and I appreciate that DART 87 is a particular type of service, has fallen. You only have to stand in Thaden Boys, look at the 418, and it invariably goes through empty. But I wonder if more could be done to publicise the DART 87 service. I haven't seen a lot about it, but there are a number of community groups in Thaden Boys, and I'm sure certainly I and others would be pleased to bring this to the attention of those groups if there are plans to increase the publicity. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, we're fighting over it. Councillor Bedford.
Thank you, Councillor Amos, for that request. There is part in of a report on page 39 of my report, which will update you. Obviously, the new £2 flat fare was very poorly received when it first came out. It wasn't actually announced by Essex until about March, till like too late in the programme, and it was for 3 months. I believe now it's being funded by central government for an additional 3 months. So we're hopeful that the new £2 flat fare will start to be taken up. The service, we always said from the beginning we would put money into it to see how it would run. Obviously, it's not a never-ending pot of money, but we will do our best to try and improve the service. There has been some improvement since it first started. It was used greatly during the pandemic when it was used by people going to hospital. The knock-on effect of that was, obviously it's a 15-seater bus, but with spacing within the bus, take the first 6 people and then they can't take any more. So we're hopefully getting back to seeing some improvements. I believe there's 400 additional passenger trips been made between April to December of 2022, as in the report. I don't think there's much more I can tell you at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Brady.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not sure which portfolio holder this is for, perhaps Councillor Avey, because it's a return to my favourite theme of rubbish. And it's just to ask a question about the depot in North Weald, the proposed depot in North Weald, and what it might be for, because I don't know if other people have been a little bit confused about some of the announcements in the press. So I wonder if he could explain to us, is it for waste lorries only, or is there going to be any sort of rubbish sorting at North Weald? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Avey.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for that question. Well, actually, I had a meeting with North Weald Parish Council earlier this week to discuss the self-same issue. I can tell you now the official title is a waste depot. I call it a vehicle park, and that's exactly what it is. I can categorically state that there will be no waste stored at that site. It is purely for the parking of waste vehicles and an admin function that goes with that. So no waste. And I assured North Weald Parish Council that have the same concerns you have about that. And obviously the depot will be important in the future procurement of a contractor for our waste contract, because we'd be advised if we don't have one, we will be at a disadvantage. In fact, such a disadvantage, we're unlikely to get any bidders in a procurement exercise. So it is underway, vehicles only, no waste.
Thank you very much for that. I don't see anybody else indicating. So thank you for those questions. Oh, sorry, Councillor Wixley, and I will say that that will be the final question because of the time. Sorry, your microphone hasn't come on. That's
right,
it now.
okay, ready to go. My question is also to Councillor Avey. I'm just reading his report regarding the vehicles. I was under the impression that the District Council owned the vehicles which are broken down, but I see in the first paragraph of your report there's reference to vehicles that actually belong to Biffa that need replacing or repairing. Could he just clarify the situation for me? Are some of the vehicles owned by Biffa and some by the District Council, or exactly how does that work out?
Thank you, Councillor.
All owned by Biffa, and they're responsible for repairing them. And one of the problems have been on the staffing side is finding people to repair the vehicles and to obtain spare parts because of problems in the shipping them.
Thank you very much. Right, so we move on to agenda item 11, which you will find on page 75, which is a fairly hefty report from Councillor Phillip. If I can hand over to Councillor Phillip to present the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, it's, as you say, a fairly hefty report. It's a full 150 pages at the rate of a page a minute. That would take me just shy of 3 hours, but I'll try and do it a little bit quicker than that. Members will be pleased I'm not going to go through it page by page, and I'm not going to go through it, hopefully in excruciating detail, but there's a really good reason for that. We started the budget preparation and first brought it back to Cabinet in October this year. Now, October, November, December, January, February, so I can count to 5. That's 5 months. It's almost half a year that we've been working on this budget. But when we started in October, we had a gap of more than 4 million between our projected net income and our projected net expenditure. And if you think about where we've ended up now, that's almost 25% of the total net expenditure. Fortunately, with a lot of work, by December, we were able to have a balanced budget, one that actually the expenditure and income balanced out. And I think I want to start at this point with my thanks to Mr. Small, Mr. Hartgrove, and my Cabinet colleagues for actually all the work they put in to actually getting from that big gap to a point where we had a balanced budget. After that December Cabinet meeting, we actually ended up with a better than expected settlement from the government. That allowed us to be a little bit more flexible in what we were actually doing. From there, so we were at Cabinet in December. It then went through scrutiny. We came back to Cabinet in February. So we've had a lot of time where we've actually been able to look at this in great detail. There is a lot of detail in there, and I'm hoping that as all of the reports, apart from the covering report, have actually been through other committees within this council already, any detailed questions have already come through, so we don't need to worry too much about that. So I want to just touch on some of the highlights first. Highlights around our general fund revenue budget. As I said, our net expenditure is about 17.5 million. That's to deliver all the services that we've got. However, with that balance, we've actually been able to do one or two crucial things as we go forward, maintaining that balanced budget. We've been able to put aside about £400,000 into a special contingency to allow us to take action around the waste contract where things happen. If things go wrong, we have money in our pockets that we can actually apply to help solve that problem. We're also, as you'll have known from some of the reports I've brought, we are likely to overspend this year. That will result in our balances dropping below the £4 million that we're expected to have as our minimal reserves. What we're going to do as part of this budget is start to put some of the money back in. We're not going to be able to fill the gap straight away, but we're putting money back into the reserves to start to bring it back towards the correct level. And that's something that we're going to need to do, and we're going to need to do going forward until we get back to the point where we have the right amount of reserves left. The good news is that we've been able to do this and still make sure that the council tax rise that I'll be bringing forward in the next report is actually less than the maximum that we're allowed to do. We were about 3.2% when it came in December. Because of the better than expected government settlement, we've been able to bring that down to 2.98. Now, members will have heard me saying in this chamber before, in the last year, that we are the lowest council tax authority in Essex. The good news is that after this budget, we will still be the lowest council tax authority in Essex. And why is that good news? That's good news because it's something for our residents. It puts as little pressure on their hard-earned money as it possibly can at the moment. We can't make it zero, but we have to be able to do what we can. As I said last year, staffing is still our major cost. We have over both the housing revenue account and the general account almost £28 million a year of costs for our staff. That is a lot of money. We're also in a position where we're not able to make our own decisions around the pay rises to staff. That's covered as a minimum by the national bargaining. It's not a case of us suddenly deciding that we need to pay all our staff loads more. But if you think about how big our salary budget is, any pay rise to staff that goes over the maximum we can raise in council tax means that we have a bigger gap, and therefore it's a case of removing some of the staffing expenditure or starting to cut services. Now, the really positive thing this year is that we have cut no services. We're keeping all the services that our residents want. We're maintaining them. It's worth saying that in this year, our salary rises were larger than we budgeted. And as I said in this chamber last year, that will mean that we will have pressure on our staff. It's not something we want to do. It's something that we probably should have done earlier, is look at what the staffing levels of various places were. We have, unfortunately, had to have a consultation and have some redundancies. And it's posts that are redundant, it's not people that are redundant. That's no reflection on the value of people or the work that they do, but it's the posts that we've... And we went through a lot of work to make sure that what we were going for were those areas which had the least impact on our services. So we've got minimal redundancies, and most of the staffing costs that we've been able to take out of the budget have been around posts that have been vacant. Now, when costs rise greater than our income, we have to cut things, and it's only fair for me to point out at this point, as we go forward, if we have staff cost rises due to pay rises that are above what we can budget for, then it will put pressure on our staffing in the future. However, we have been able to maintain those things that are important. A couple of places I would actually highlight. We've kept, I know it's particularly dear to the leader, our highways rangers, and to Councillor Holly Whitbread, we've maintained funding for our police. We've quite a lot of income that is more than just the council tax. Our council tax is still under 9 million for the year, but we're getting significant income from Qualis. We give them loans, we charge them margin on the loan, so we make money from Qualis by lending to them. We get money in from planning. Now, unfortunately, we're not getting as much in from planning as we predicted, partly because we haven't yet got a local plan adopted, and partly because of the global economic environment that actually means that people are doing less development at the moment. And we've actually got money in from the government as well. Now, if I look at the HRA, and we often just gloss over the HRA, a couple of highlights for that. It's actually going to show this year a surplus of about 350,000, and that's with a below inflation rent rise of the 7%. Big costs in the housing revenue account are employees. Again, there's a theme there going on, but also depreciation. Our stock depreciates year on year, and that has a significant impact on the housing revenue account. I do have to call out, there is actually one mistake in the detail of the reports that came to Cabinet, and I have to congratulate Councillor Heap on being the one person who spotted it. There was a rise in the animal welfare cost up to 40,000. Now, this is actually simply an error. We had an officer who was on maternity leave. When she came back, she saw there wasn't funding for the collection of dog waste in the animal welfare budget. She didn't realise that that budget had actually been put into the general refuse collection budget. So she put it back in. So I actually have, as a surprise, got about £30,000 extra. Now, Councillor Whitbread, of the Holly type, twisted my arm and said, in this district, the police officers that we fund have done a really good job. They make a significant difference to our population. We were looking to reduce the expenditure there, so rather than taking that 30,000 and putting it into our contingency reserve, I'm going to put it back into the police budget so that remains as it was. Moving on now to the other parts of this overall report. The capital budget. Over the next 5 years, it's almost £275 million on capital expenditure. The majority of that is actually in the HRA. But we've had other things mentioned already. There is money in the budget to provide that vehicle depot at North Weald. There is money in the capital budget to allow us to buy our own refuse freighters, so that going forward we have the control over that. And there's also money in the budget to fully fund the construction of the new Epping Leisure Centre with the swimming pool, which is a great piece of news for people in this area. For the capital in the HRA, a lot of it goes into house building and acquisition of housing, but there's also significant contributions towards capital works and to regeneration. Moving on to the fees and charges. Many in the general fund don't go up at all, but those that do, we've taken a 10.1 CPI rate to put those fees and charges up. That's what's being used as a benchmark. We have also in this the medium-term financial plan. Now, the medium-term financial plan is a horrible thing to read if you happen to be the finance portfolio holder, because it actually shows deficits for the coming years. So we may have thought that producing the budget for this year has been difficult, but we know, for example, we've got the new waste contract coming, and with the new waste contract coming, that's going to cost us more money, and therefore there's a deficit, so we won't have an easy ride next year in terms of producing the budget. So that's in there as well. There's also a report from Mr. Small as the Section 151 officer, and as part of the budget setting process, the 151 officer has to give a full report on the robustness of the budget as presented. That's why we need to go through all this work to make sure that by the time we hit full council today, we are in a position that we have a robust budget so that we don't need to change it and get a new report from Section 151 officer. There's a report on our reserves. I've already touched on those, that we are going to be below our 4 million, but we're going to start paying back in there, and the plan is over the next 4 to 5 years that we bring that back up to our appropriate level. And finally, there's reports on Treasury management and capital strategy. Those have been through the Audit and Governance Committee, and they've forwarded them on to Council for adoption and noting. Chairman, there are, I think it's, yes, 10 recommendations on this report. I suggest when we come to it, we take them en masse rather than line by line, but I'm happy to take questions if any come up.
Thank you very much. And members, any questions on the budget as set out? Councillor Wixley.
Yeah, just for the avoidance of doubt, I'm looking on page 94, which refers to community safety, and it says the size of the dedicated policing team will be reduced. I take it from what the councillor's just said, Councillor Phillips just said, that that in fact is now out of date and the policing team won't be reduced. Is that correct? And just going down to the next line, the community programme, will those reductions still apply as well? So it's two parts of my question.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hollywood. Oh.
So let me answer the second one first. The 30,000 is distinctly for the community policing, the community safety. That's not reflected in the community programmes. They are in the same way affected as they were going to be.
Councillor Holly-Whitbread.
Thank you. I don't think I need to add to that too much, but just to say obviously there are ongoing conversations and negotiations with the police. We're incredibly fortunate at the moment. We actually get one additional officer on top of the 3 that we hire. So we're trying to get best value for our money, but obviously the police are negotiating too. But I'm really pleased that we've got this additional 30,000, which will mean that we'll be able to retain the 3 original officers.
Thank you very much. Councillor Macready.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Again, looking at page 94, community programmes, and it's been brought to my attention with the cancellation of the life walks, which are really important to many of our residents, and the ones I've spoken to or have spoken to me are really happy to pay for it themselves. But the actual cancellation of these things, I think, is very detrimental to our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor? Sorry, I'm just looking to see who's going to take it. Councillor Patel.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for the question, Councillor Macready. The life walks have not been cancelled. We've moved our approach to a volunteer-led approach, and we've upskilled some of the volunteers with training in order to lead these programmes moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor John Whitehouse.
Thanks, Chairman. Yes, it's obviously been a difficult and uncomfortable budget, and I'll try not to repeat things which I've said before. I mean, it's always concerning when you end up in a situation where the council's consulting on possible redundancies and possible staff cuts. And I think we need to recognise that even if some staff have been shifted around as opposed to made redundant, the fact there are fewer staff to do the job means that some things won't get done, or there's increased pressure on those that are left. And we've obviously been carrying quite a high vacancy load and benefited in a sense in terms of savings from having high levels of vacancies in past years. That level of vacancies will need to diminish if the job's going to continue to get done. So those potential savings from carrying high levels of vacancies potentially aren't available in the future, and I think we need to be aware of that. There's some big rises in fees and charges that people are going to have to swallow, and need some new charges like the introduction of charges for replacement bins. And I think we're still waiting to see the detailed policies we were promised at Cabinet in terms of how those policies are going to be implemented, because there were significant concerns raised both by Cabinet members and non-Cabinet members about that when the meeting took place. I was surprised when the policing were one of the priorities for cuts. and I'm pleased that some money is going back into there. The cut was £45,000, replacement's £30,000. It'd be helpful to know where the missing, as it were, £15,000 fits into that. One of the other things the budget does, of course, is also highlight the impact of Qualis's activities on the council. When Qualis borrows a lot from the council gets those benefits. When Qualis's programme is delayed and it doesn't need to draw down on the borrowing, the council misses out, or that income is delayed, which highlights the importance of us knowing exactly what Qualis is doing. And in that regard, we do need to see Qualis's business plan sooner rather than later. It was understandable that a short-term one had to be drawn up in the chaos of last year, but we need to get back to seeing a long-term business plan from Qualis, given that their projects stretch decades into advance. I was pleased to see that the sports centre, the relocation of Epping Sports Centre, is still in the capital programme, but startled to see the £8 million increase in that, and hopefully we'll get more detail when that comes to Cabinet in March. I mean, only a few weeks ago we were told at the Leisure Contract Monitoring Board there were no surprises expected in terms of the costs. So, that is, well, that's something that, clearly we'll need more detail about. But yes, I'll conclude by thanking the officers and everyone who's worked on the budget. It's always a difficult task. It's been particularly difficult this year. And there's clearly still more work to be done to make it come through. The other change that hasn't been mentioned earlier is the reduction in the voluntary sector, a second year in a row that we'll be giving less to the voluntary sector than we were the year before. And we may no longer have a grants officer to administer that, but it's still an important function that the council does, particularly as we just heard from Councillor Patel, increasing reliance on volunteers to deliver services. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Phillip.
Thank you, Chairman. There's a number of parts in that. I would agree with Councillor Whitehouse that redundancies are unfortunate. It is roles that are going, and we're making sure that it's the right roles that are going. A lot of the roles that have been vacant have been identified as no longer needed because they have been vacant for a period of time. And yes, I agree that that means we won't get savings from not spending on the things that we weren't going to spend on anyway. It ties in as well a little bit with what we were saying about Qualis. I have a friend who sold his house recently. He got an offer which was accepted for $12,000 over the asking price. When the surveyor valued it, it came back and they were only willing to offer $6,000 over the asking price. Now that's the question. Is that $6,000 up or $6,000 down? It depends, I think, on whether you're a glass half full or glass half empty. I tend to be, it's a glass that can be refilled sort of person. But Qualis does make a significant contribution. Yes, it's not making as much because it's not finding properties to regenerate in the district. But as I said in the chamber many times before, I'd much rather we took longer to get the right properties that we can actually do something positive for the district and Qualis make money than rush into it and actually either not do something that's necessary or even worse in terms of our finances, do something that doesn't make money. In terms of the sports centre, I don't think anybody who's seen anything around construction over the past year would be surprised that the costs have gone up over the past 12 months. That's been across the news. I've mentioned it in, I've forgotten quite how many meetings. So it's not a surprise that it's higher. It's in the budget. It was in the budget when we brought it to Cabinet. So it's not a surprise now. So yes, it does cost more, but it's something that's really important for us to do. It's a commitment that I made in this chamber around a new sports centre for Epping when I was bringing forward the local plan. It's something that, along with the local plan, we want to deliver. It's something we've got to do, and I'm glad that we're able to do it.
Thank you. Councillor Heat.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, it's a tricky one because I disagree with many of the decisions that got us to this point, indeed the formation of Qualis. But given that's where we are, I think it's a pretty robust budget. But there was one more anomaly that I think Councillor Phillips has avoided. He gave us an answer at ONS or Cabinet, and that is the transfer of grounds maintenance from EFDC to Qualis, which is going to put the cost up as a line item by £218,944. Why?
Thank you. Councillor Phillip?
Because we're paying Qualis directly for it, rather than we're paying our staff wages within the council.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Chris Pond.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I was going to address items 11 and 12, which cover both the budget and the council tax setting together, if I may. And before I start, I wanted to thank the officers because a really great deal of work has been gone into these hundreds of pages of detailed financial information. And I know the sort of travails they would have gone through to get to the state we are today. Some years ago, Madam Chairman, when the District Development Committee and then the Full Council were considering the plan for a 25-acre warehouse on Dowding Way in Waltham Abbey, Councillor Phillip said something I found quite revealing. He said, I need the rental income from this building. Yes, he did. Or it may have been paraphrased, but at the time I thought it was a rather unplanning-based reason. But that's not why I'm saying it today. I'm saying it because I think in his work with the medium-term financial strategy, Councillor Phillip probably knew that the economic situation 2 or 3 years down the line was not a good one. And I'm sure he would have found whatever the income was from Next PLC quite a helpful adjunct in setting this budget. As he said just a few moments ago, if it doesn't make money, I'm not quite so interested in it. So, since I and the Waltham Abbey councillors were opposed to this development as being too large and deleterious to the way of life of residents, I was surprised, really, to hear that most telling of phrases. But it was certainly a cogent reason, because as Councillor Phillips has said throughout tonight and throughout the whole budget process, it's a question of getting that £4 million deficit down and making a balanced budget. So I don't think the precariousness of this year's budget was anything to be surprised at, but of course it was a much more commodious vice, if you like, being applied with much more force, of which the levers have been the Ukraine, fuel prices, interest rates, government of economic activity, I was going to say mismanagement, but I won't, and continuing government persecution of local government by restricting its ability to raise council tax by less than 1/3 of inflation, because that's what it is. An EFDC having gone from a much vaunted debt-free council 10 years ago to a council which is now intimately involved in the manipulation of debt, partly through Qualis, seems to me to make us especially vulnerable. Nobody wants to put more burden on the residents than we have to. As Councillor Whitbread often says, we don't have any council money, we only have the residents' money in trust to spend. He's quite right. Nobody wants to do that, but it may be that we hope things ease off, and as Councillor Whitbread himself said, we got a little bit more out of the government than we were expecting, which did ease things. Of course, we may, I have no idea, and I have no great preferences in the matter, we may have a different coloured Westminster government, and which may have different ideas. I really do congratulate Councillor Phillip in manipulating all these accounts and getting to a state where he can propose a fairly balanced budget, a well-balanced budget today. It took much effort to achieve the balance of this budget, I'm sure, and I take Councillor Phillips' word for that. But it is a budget generally of pain rather than of gain, and especially it's of pain for those loyal officers of EFDC who are being made redundant. I'm very sorry to see that. There's not much gain. It's a TINA budget. There is a no alternative budget and a force majeure budget. I shall vote for it because I don't think we have anywhere else to go. I think a good job has been done within the parameters that we're working under. We just have to go along with it. But I shan't say agree yes in the named vote with any great enthusiasm. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Phillip.
Thank you, Chairman. And I refute strongly the fact, the quote that was attributed to me by Councillor Pond. We didn't own the land. We had no interest in the land. We could never have received any rent for it. All we would ever have received for that land would have been business rates. And as a district council, all we'd have done was retain some of them. We don't retain a lot of our business rates. Councillor Pond may be confusing himself with when we were talking about how we addressed the potential appeal and the cost for appeal, and obviously costs in the appeal I did want to keep down as low as possible. I do take exception as well to the words manipulation of debt and manipulation of the budget. No, we worked hard on the budget. We worked very hard. There were no other alternative suggestions that came forward. I also take exception to the fact that he's running the budget down. There's a lot of good stuff in there. We've got a new vehicle depot coming forward. We've got waste freighters being purchased. We're in the midst, as Councillor Amos knows, of a recycling trial in Thaden Boyce, which will actually make things better. We're continuing with that. We're looking at this new sports centre in Epping. We have recently had a new sports centre in Waltham Abbey. We're progressing to having a local plan that we can actually go forward with. There's a lot of good stuff in there. We're keeping our police. We're doing highways rangers. We've got stuff in there for highways rangers to actually be able to do significant work. And I know the leader, as part of his role in county, is actually speaking there on a regular basis, try and get more capability within the district for us to do more with our highways rangers, so we can do more for the things that irritate our residents. I think this is a very positive budget. It's not a manipulative budget. We've gone for where we had. The one thing I will agree with Councillor Pond on, I am very sorry that we've had to reduce our staff. It's been unfortunate that that's not been able to be completely achieved by people leaving of their own accord. I'd much prefer to be at a point where we have a workforce that is the right workforce at the right size without having to take actions. I mean, I myself, many years ago, was part of one of those actions, and I know, even though it's the role that's been set aside, you do feel it yourself. So I want to stress to our officers who are unfortunately leaving us that it's not a reflection on them. However, we were at a number of establishment that was too high to take forward. We cannot afford it. If the amount that needs to be paid on salaries is more than we can actually achieve through the careful financial work that we do and the money we get from our council tax and from the government, there is no option. We cannot go overdrawn as a council, so we have to make those difficult decisions. That doesn't mean we like to do them. I don't think any of us like to do that, but it's the only way that we can keep the council working. And what it does mean is that we will be able to do the things we need to do as efficiently as we can going forward.
Thank you. Have I got any other members who wish to ask? Councillor Helen Kane.
Thank you, Chairman, for giving me the opportunity. I would personally like to thank Councillor Phillip and the officers. We were kept informed throughout this budget, the process and all the phases. it was asked from us to actually to give suggestions because it would have been such a challenging budget. We asked questions and we got answers. I agree it has been a very challenging year, and of course I am also very sorry to see officers made redundant. But we need to keep the services and promises to our residents. So a big thank you from me to all the officers for that excellent job. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Holly-Whitbread.
Thank you, Chairman. And I thought I'd just say a few comments in summary, if that's okay, of the discussions this evening. And I think every year for the last few years, living through really extraordinary times with a pandemic, followed by the war in Ukraine and the economic impact that that has, we've said we're going to have a really difficult budget this year. And every year has been difficult in the past few years. But I think what we've seen this year is the beginning of the crunch point. So we got a great deal of support from the government during the pandemic, but now things are starting to get tough. And this past year has been particularly difficult. And I've sat through many of the meetings with my fellow cabinet members, and may I thank Councillor Phillip for his work in arranging those, and because they weren't easy conversations. And I think it was the first time where we've really looked with a magnifying glass at every single possible detail of the budget, and not just where we can make savings, but how we can innovate, how we can bring more income in. And we do that for one simple reason, because we want to provide the best value for our residents here in Epping Forest. And we want to do that by continuing to keep taxes low, which this budget has achieved, and protecting the services which are most important to us, which this budget has also achieved. And when I spoke to Councillor Phillip just a couple of days ago about potentially being able to rescue that police officer with the 30,000 funding that he found, I was delighted, because we do forget what amazing work these police officers do, and we should never forget that actually just in the building opposite us we've got 4 police officers, Essex police officers, who are tasked by this council, who do work across our district, fully funded by us, exclusively working for us and the people we represent. And they do really fantastic work, from tackling county lines to antisocial behaviour. Those are the things that our residents most care about. And as the Cabinet Member for Housing, I spend most time in this chamber talking about my pride in council house building and regeneration. And I'm pleased that this budget safeguards this. Yes, we will have more challenges in the coming years because of the cost of building and development, but we are going to continue to invest in our estates so they're the best possible quality. And they are ageing estates, so we want to make sure that they're fit for purpose for residents for years to come. And we will continue building so that young people here in Epping Forest who have lived here for at least 7 years, which is an important part of the policy, can have an opportunity to live locally. So I won't talk for too long this evening, but what I would say is we never rejoice at having to lose staff, and we know how hard they work. We never rejoice as, and I would proudly say as a low-tax Conservative, having to increase any form of council tax, but this is a moderate rise. We're still the lowest council tax in Essex, something I'm very proud of, and we're providing good value and excellent services for our residents. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Did you want to come back, Councillor Phillip, or do you... Right, I don't see anybody else indicating, so if you wish to present.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes. Thank you for everybody who's contributed in the debate tonight. It's, as I said at the beginning, it's been a hard and long activity to get here. The good news is that we're remaining a financially sensible organisation. We have a balanced budget. We've been able to keep our services going. We've been able to provide for good new things as well. And we've been able to keep our council tax, which I'll say a little bit more in the next item, down at a sensible level. Chairman, I just suggest that we move items 1 to 10 in the recommendations en bloc.
Thank you very much. And because of the nature of this particular set of recommendations, we do have to take a recorded vote. So I'll hand over to Mr Woodhall to run us through the process for that.
Councillor Allgood.
For.
Councillor Amos.
Against.
Councillor Avey.
For.
Councillor Balcom.
For.
Councillor Baldwin. Councillor Bedford.
For the budget.
Councillor Bolton.
For the budget.
Councillor Brady.
For.
Councillor Brooks. Abstention. Councillor Burrows.
For.
Councillor Gabbett. Councillor Heath.
For.
Councillor Heather.
For.
Councillor Joggia. Councillor Helen Kane.
For.
Councillor Sam Kane.
For.
Councillor Kaufman.
For.
Councillor Kesker.
For.
Councillor Lee.
For.
Councillor Leppert.
For.
Councillor Lyon. He's not here.
No.
Councillor Lucas.
For.
Councillor Matthews.
For.
Councillor McCready.
Against.
Councillor McIver.
For the budget.
Councillor Mead.
For the budget.
Councillor Morgan.
For.
Councillor Murray.
Against.
Councillor Weekey.
For the budget.
Councillor Parsons.
For.
Councillor Aniket Patel.
For.
Councillor Phillip.
For.
Councillor Chris Pond.
For.
Councillor Caroline Pond. Councillor Pugsley.
For.
Councillor Rackham.
For.
Councillor Risby.
For.
Councillor Sartin.
For.
Councillor Stalker.
For.
Councillor Stocker.
For.
Councillor Sunder.
For.
Councillor Vaz.
For.
Councillor Chris Whitbread.
For.
Councillor Holly Whitbread.
For.
Councillor Janet Whitehouse.
Against.
Councillor John Whitehouse.
Against.
Councillor Ken Williamson. Councillor David Wixley.
For.
And Councillor Yerrell.
For.
Chairman, that's 42 for, 5 against and 1 abstention.
Thank you very much. So the budget for 2023-24 has been agreed. Thank you. We now move on to item 12 on the agenda. Now, this was pages that were originally part of the agenda as issued, but subsequently there was found to be an error in one of them, so a supplementary item 12 was published, and so the numbering, instead of being 225, we are starting with a number 3. But it is the supplementary part of agenda item 12 that we're dealing with here. So the council tax setting for 2023-24, Councillor Phillip.
Thank you, Chairman. I will try and keep this one quite short. We now have a budget that's agreed, even if some people in the Chamber decided that they didn't like the budget without any alternative suggestions. I only can assume that the things that we're actually putting in the budget are the things that they are against. Things like contribution towards the Epping Sports Centre, things like providing a strong base for our waste contract going forward, things like preserving our police and preserving our highways rangers. However, we now have a budget that we have to fund. We fund that budget through the setting of the council tax. I won't go through each of the individual recommendations because they are constrained by what we need to do from a legal point of view, and they're not the most readable. I think the most useful place to look at is actually on page 4, which is the table of where the various council tax rises come in. It's really encouraging to see that with what we're proposing, we'll be at 2.98%, the lowest over all those percentages. The overall rise for our residents will unfortunately be 4.11%, driven by a number of things. It's interesting to notice, and I'm sure there are people in the Chamber who will comment on how good their parish or town councils are at keeping their council tax at a sensible level. But we have significant rises in our parish and town council precepts. You can see that's, on average, that's over 7% rise. All the detailed council tax levels, particularly for the individuals, parish and town councils, are in the appendix. You can see in Appendix A on page 8 for each of the parishes, and the various different bands in the parishes in Appendix B. And the total council tax we can see in Appendix C. Altogether, that raises the council tax that we need to levy, the precepts for our parish and town councils, the tax from Essex County Council, and from the Police and Crime Commissioner part, and the fire part of the Police and Crime Commissioner's area. Altogether, that's all covered in this report. Hopefully there should be no errors of detail, since the one issue that we did have in one of the tables, and it was only internal to the table, it wasn't the totals are correct, it was the table hadn't updated correctly. Hopefully we're all happy with those.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments? No? Oh, Councillor Whitbread, yes.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I've kept quiet for a while this evening to let other colleagues have their say on the budget. I think I'm budgeted out in recent weeks, having just done the county one and, of course, been actively engaged with Councillor Phillip on this particular budget. I haven't had the opportunity before, but if I can just put on record my thanks and ask for them to be minuted for the hard work of all officers across the council, in particular the finance team, who have worked tirelessly on this budget. You heard before, it almost went back to the days in the early 2000s when we actually did lock everyone in the room until we'd found £200,000 worth of savings. Fact, it happened. We've had tough times to budget before, and I can remember days when this council was a double-digit council tax increasing council under Labour, Liberal Democrats, and of course the LRA at the time. But since the Conservatives have been in control, we've had a proud record of sound finance, keeping council tax as low as possible and delivering and protecting frontline services, which is what this budget does. And I think my colleagues have done extremely well to keep this council tax increase under control, alongside Conservative colleagues in other parts of the county, which I think is really, really important. As you know, I think it's important this is a bold budget at the same time. I don't need to go on again. We've protected the highways rangers where other districts are losing theirs. Amazing that the Liberal Democrats do not support the highways rangers. We've managed to maintain the third police officer, which looked under threat after some really careful budget work up to the last minute this week. Again, I'm not surprised the Liberal Democrats don't support that. They've never supported us having our own police here in Epping Forest, and that's a fact. I think we can go back to the original voting, so I'm surprised they raised it this evening, but got it wrong again. And then, of course, Epping Sports Centre. We've been working hard on this side of the house to make sure we get that sports centre delivered for Epping Forest and for Epping, who's been waiting 50 years for a swimming pool. I'm amazed tonight the Liberal Democrats have voted against the budget that actually secures that. So we have seen what they mean. Did they put any alternative forward to our council tax increase and what our budget says? No. Nothing at all. Deadly quiet. Nothing at scrutiny. Nothing at cabinet. The Liberal Democrats have not contributed to this council whatsoever. And in fact, when they come knocking at someone's door to say what they're providing for the district, the answer is the Liberal Democrats do nothing, just talk about it. It's us that deliver time and time again. I recommend this council's council tax increase this year and the sound finance behind it.
Chairman, on a point of personal information, shall I point out that the Liberal Democrats did contribute to scrutiny, supported the police in the in my speech, and indeed welcome the fact that Epping Sports Centre remained in the budget in the speech. Listen to what we say and what we do.
Sorry, Councillor Whitehouse, but Councillor Murray had indicated that he wished to follow on from that.
I hadn't really intended speaking tonight, and then you have to listen to two contributions like that, which are completely unacceptable in a setting of local government. We're here to look after the interests of local people. We are not here to score petty political points against one political party and another political party. How dare Councillor Phillips surmise the reason why I voted against the budget? I've learned to my cost at other meetings that they're not really interested in other people's points of view, but I will deal with that under the ONS report. That was mainly why I kept my own counsel tonight. But how dare he stand up here and tell the members of the public via the webcast why I voted against the budget? Because the reasons he gave were completely wrong. And now we have to listen to the Leader of Council, and I am angry, Madam Chairman, because I hadn't intended talking about this, scoring cheap political points against a party that he sees as a threat. We're not in the House of Commons. You are the leader for the whole council. You're the leader of the whole council.
Sorry, Councillor.
Through the chair.
Sorry, Councillor.
Through the chair. This is controlled anger. He's the leader of the whole council. He is not just the leader of the Conservative group. And sometimes he needs to remember that. It would have been a lot better if he hadn't spoken in the way that he had spoken. Yet again, he makes the accusation that there was somehow three parties in control at one stage. No, I've been on this council, Chairman, 42 years. The only time where we have had a council control was when the Conservatives had controlled it. And do they control it? And they make that perfectly clear meeting after meeting. The period of time that he is referring to is a period of time where the Conservative group were by far the largest group still, but they just didn't happen to have a majority. There was no coalition, no agreement between the other three parties. I can assure you of that, Chairman. And again, I lay down the challenge, because he keeps on bringing it up on an irregular basis. Show us the evidence that there was an agreement between Labour, the LRA and the Liberals at the time. There wasn't. Do not confuse, Madam Chairman, the very short period of time where the Conservatives didn't have a majority, but were by still far the largest group. From memory, they were double. They were by still far the largest group. But yeah, absolutely, they weren't in complete control. but there was no coalition between the three. So let's just get rid of that again. Otherwise, if we're going to carry on saying that, and it's water well under the bridge, but it still comes up occasionally, provide the evidence. There is no evidence, Madam Chairman. The Conservatives were welcome on board as part of that, but they walked away. Because they didn't have a majority, they walked away. That's fine, but do not carry on with the myth that the one period of time where the Conservatives have dominated, ruthlessly dominated this council, I might add, that would be my view and my experience, ruthlessly dominated, as shown at the last AGM and a number of other meetings since, with the idea that there was a coalition made up of other three parties. That just is not true, Madam Chair.
Thank you for your comments. I hope that those following on will consider what they are going to say and how they're going to say it. I have got indicated Councillor Holly Whitbread, Councillor Macready and Councillor Phillip in that order. Councillor Holly Whitbread.
Thank you, Chairman. I certainly won't be quite as shouty as Councillor Murray. I try not to be too political in this chamber, and it's not a house, it is a chamber. We're here to represent the people of Epping Forest. But I'll first address the Liberal Democrats' comments, because actually I'm also here to represent the people of Epping, Lindsay and Thornwood Common. And actually, the Lib Dems have come to and we do have to make these comments in this chamber because it's a public forum and it's our opportunity to put the facts right. And year after year, we get these ridiculous yellow leaflets through our door, which are just completely misleading to residents. Already this year, I've had an elderly lady come up to me very distressed because one of the Lib Dem councillors had told her that we're stopping life walks, which actually are a real lifeline to her. When they're not stopping, they're continuing. And one of the Lib Dem candidates who's up this year for election literally is trying to scare an old lady who enjoyed a community facility when it was not true. And year after year, I have to stand up in this chamber and try and defend some other nonsense which is on a Lib Dem leaflet. And that is why I'm using a public place to put the record straight. And throughout the scrutiny process, they might have picked up on details, but they've put no alternatives forward. Name me one alternative that you, as the Liberal Democrat group, have put forward. And there are none. You offer nothing. Nothing but criticism, nothing positive. And that is why today Councillor Whitbread spoke against the Liberal Democrats, and I stand by that point. Nothing to offer, no alternatives. And as for Councillor Murray, apologies, you are a history teacher and I'm a student of history, so I do like learning lessons about this chamber. But I understand there was once a cabinet which had Labour representatives and Lib Dem and independent representatives, and we see the record of their delivery and that the Conservatives picked up the pieces. Thank you, Chairman.
And if I can go to Councillor Macready.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've just got two areas I'd like to speak about. First, about the life walks, and it was actually brought to me by at least two people who attend them that they were being cancelled, which is why I raised it tonight. So I thank Councillor Pell for updating me on what is actually happening, and I shall relay that information to the walker. The other point, in my very early days of being a councillor, and I'm going back to a meeting here in the chamber, it was when I was just a town councillor, it was just before a Christmas, possibly 6 years ago. I couldn't get into the chamber because it was so busy. I was sitting downstairs watching it on the screen, and it was talking about the local plan. Now, this is about the Liberal Democrats speaking against the leisure centre. Now, my recollection, and I appreciate, I am 72 years old today, my memory is not that good, but I can remember this very well, that I was sitting downstairs and I was quite shocked at the level of conversations, shall I politely call it, between the various sides. They were talking about the leisure centres, or that came up, but I remembered clearly Councillor John Whitehouse saying about having a leisure centre. He said 2 words to add to this: in Epping. Councillor John Whitehouse wanted a leisure centre in Epping. And I remember very clearly Councillor Holly Whitbread saying, that the Liberal Democrats have a blue sky mentality. That I will not forget. So I cannot say... they were...
No, excuse me.
May I finish?
Allow the councillor to finish.
I remember that very clearly, and at that point I was quite astounded by the behaviour in the House, and I cannot see that the Lib Dems are against having the leisure centre. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman, just to say, no, I'll drop it after this point, but I have never said that I didn't want a sports centre in Epping, and actually it's been... No, I didn't.
Right, sorry,
Chairman.
I'm going to ask you to finish
Chairman,
your point.
can I just...
Councillor Holly Whitbread, please retain your seat. Councillor Phillip has indicated that he wished to say something. I'm sure he will follow up on that point as well.
Thank you, Chairman. Surprisingly enough, I remember the meeting that Councillor McCready is referring to quite well. I'm not being on my feet quite as much tonight as I was that night, and we did go through a number of things. There was never a suggestion that we would not be providing a leisure centre. The one difficulty at that point was working out exactly where it would be. We've been able to find a location within Epping, which is going to work well. Part of what we need in our budget is to be able to fund that. Without the budget that we have approved as this chamber, we would not be able to fund that leisure centre. It's always very difficult. And I hear what Councillor Murray said, but he didn't say anything during the budget debate about how to improve the budget, how to make changes to it. Neither did most of the Liberal Democrats say things. I know Councillor John Whitehouse did make some statements around things, but I come back to what Councillor Holly Whitbread said. As we've taken this through, we've been looking for ways to balance the budget. Right from October, I have asked for people to make suggestions. I have not had them from any other grouping within the chamber. But setting aside the budget, because that has been passed, we now have to fund that budget. That's what this council tax setting is for. We would find ourselves in a very, very difficult position if we agree a budget and then don't agree the council tax to fund it. We need to do the right thing. And it's the right thing for this district to make sure that we actually balance those books. We need to do it. We can only assume why people don't think budgets are a good idea if they say nothing about it. And making assumptions is exactly how I started my speech. I have to assume, because there isn't anything else to go. Chairman, I think it's time to move forward on this. I would like to put forward recommendations 1 and 2 with all its sub-clauses to council so that we can have a council tax set for our council for next year so that we can get to the purposes of putting out our council tax requests tomorrow.
Thank you. So can I ask those members in favour of the council tax as set out on pages, well, on the pages within this report, those in favour of the council tax?
All bar one, Chairman.
Those against?
One, Chairman.
So the council tax as set out on this agenda item have been agreed. Thank you very much. And if we move on to agenda item 13, which is the local council tax support scheme for 23-24. And again, I hand over to Councillor John Phillip.
Thank you, Chairman. This is the local council tax support scheme. It's what replaced council tax benefit back in 2013. We have to review it and approve it each year. There is absolutely no changes whatsoever from what we did last year, and I recommend to council.
Thank you. Anybody got any comments, questions? In that case, can I ask members to agree this recommendation? Agreed. Thank you very much. And now we come on to agenda item 14, which is the pay policy statement, which I gather Councillor Sam Kane will present.
Thank you, Chairman. It is what it is. It's a statement of fact. It's a requirement that this council publishes this statement, pay policy statements to the world, and it's on our website. There's little to debate, as it's just a statement of fact. This is where we are. So I vote that we just move through. Thank you.
Sorry, can we just hold one moment, because I think... Councillor John Whitehouse.
Thanks, Chairman. Yes, it's a statement of fact, but as I think I've said previously here, it's not really a complete statement of fact if it doesn't also cover Qualis, which is delivering services for the council, is entirely controlled by the council, gets its money from the council and works from council offices. And I think, particularly given the increasing shift towards Qualis delivering council services, we do need a pay policy which fully represents the way that pay works. I mean, I think last time this was mentioned, someone said that Qualis had no more relationship to us than Biffa did, and it was as if we were trying to control what a director of Biffa was doing. I don't think that's right, and indeed I think we saw from a previous council meeting this year how that's not right, because this council made recommendations that specifically referred to appointments to Biffa and so on. So, I do think that's something that needs to be considered for next year. I don't think... I mean, things fall pretty in the cracks when you don't do that. I mean, at one point last year, the council was paying someone to work 5 days a week for Biffa, 2 days a week for Qualis. Those sort of things are not healthy for the individual, not healthy for the council. And, because we're not bringing those things together, those things, I think, are not being caught. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Phillip.
Thank you, Chairman. As Councillor Whitehouse mentioned Qualis, it would be entirely inappropriate to put Qualis into the Council's pay policy statement because the Council do not pay people in Qualis. We have a regular report coming to the Council on a quarterly basis for the financial performance of Qualis. That covers that. We have a 1 year, and normally, when it's not so turbulent, a 4-year business plan for Qualis, which looks forward to it. And I'm quite happy to tell Councillor Whitehouse that Qualis is working on that 4-year business plan. I've already talked about it. We will bring it back to overview scrutiny this year, so we will have a 4-year business plan. That's how we cover that one. I don't disagree with Councillor Whitehouse that having people working for 5 days a week for the council and 2 days a week for Qualis is not necessarily helpful. We're not in that situation now. We do have people who have roles and responsibilities in this chamber and in this council, but also in Qualis. That's perfectly reasonable. We're looking at that, not least because we're looking at the cost profile of Qualis to see what we can do to actually make it leaner and smoother, given the constraints that we have with the financial side of things, particularly in the construction area. This is not the right place for this, but I do bring a Qualis report on a regular basis.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? In that case, can we approve the Council's pay policy statement for 2023-24? Thank you very much. And the final item on the agenda is the overview and scrutiny report, which again came out as a supplementary. And if I can hand over to Councillor Kane.
Thank you, Chairman, and apologies to everyone for being in a supplementary. The report was there ready, but for some clerical mistake, these things happen, I'm afraid. So I hope you were given the opportunity to actually read the report, and I will take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got 3 points to make on the report, but can I first of all please offer you, Chairman, as the Chairman of the meeting, and my fellow councillors an apology, not for what I said the last time I spoke, but perhaps how I said it. It was controlled anger, but I was annoyed, and sometimes you have to express your level of annoyance. But I do offer an apology. I perhaps didn't get the tone right. Don't regret my words, but maybe I should have been, in the words of someone, a little less shouty. So I do apologise. Yeah, I want to say three things here, and I'm going to choose my words very carefully. Well, the first one I don't need to, because I've said it before and I'm going to say it again. Overall, I think the quality of chairmanship of ONS is absolutely excellent, and thank you for that, Councillor Kane. My second point, though, would be that what happened at ONS at the last meeting, in my view, and partly, well, I suppose almost entirely because I was subjected to it, was not, in my view, acceptable. I think it's the first time that we've ever gone into an adjournment during a live meeting and the webcast stopped. And tonight would not be the right place to explore what happened, but quite a lot of members of ONS were, well, all the members of ONS were there, so quite a lot of members of council were there and know what I'm referring to. And I just want to put on public record, Chairman, that in hindsight, I think the level of coercion that I was put under during that adjournment was not acceptable. I'm still quite bitter about it, and it led to the fact that I didn't pursue something much against my better judgment. I wasn't happy about doing it at the time, and the more I think about it, the less happier I am about it. But I was coerced into taking a course of action, and I took that course of action. The people who were at that ONS meeting know who were involved in the coercion, and I just want to put on public record, Chairman, that I wasn't happy with it at the meeting, and I'm still very unhappy about it now. And I think a less experienced councillor, someone who was new to the council, that would really would have been an even more difficult experience for them to deal with. And I just don't think it was acceptable, but we are where we are. And then thirdly, I think it led to the fact that, in my view, I'm still not happy that we've had a proper scrutiny of Qualis and housing repairs. I think there are a lot of questions that still need to be asked. And though I don't by any means regard it as a scientific piece of research, again, I've shared this all with members of ONS and some other leading members of council, including the leader of council. I don't for 1 minute declare it as to be a scientific piece of research, but I put across 2 community Facebook groups, I put a very neutral, and it was neutral because I shared it with people, a very neutral request for residents' experiences of Qualis repairs, and I got a couple of positive responses which I shared with everyone, but I was surprised by the number and the detail of residents across our district who were experiencing real difficulties with Qualis repairs, and that was from across our district. That was Epping, Abridge, Waltham Abbey, Buckhurst Hill, some from Loughton. None of the residents that contacted me, and it was all done privately, it wasn't done on the public vehicle of Facebook. The request was, but I asked them to privately message me. And because of how that meeting was conducted, I felt unable to take any further part in that ONS meeting. So I wasn't able to, and that was probably because of what I had experienced. I'm not saying the chairman ruled me out of order on this one, but I didn't pursue those within the context of the meeting. And anyone who feels that we can be entirely happy with how Qualis is dealing with our housing repairs, I think really needs to think again. I've never had that level of detail and concern expressed to me from people across the district when mayors were involved in our housing repairs, and I've been here long enough to know when the DLO was doing it. And again, I've never had the level and the depth and the time that people were prepared to take to explain what problems they had had on an ongoing basis. So to finish off, Chairman, I want to put on record that I wasn't happy with how the meeting was conducted and what took place during the adjournment. But I still repeat that overall I think Councillor Kane is an excellent chairman of ONS, and there's still a big question mark as far as I'm concerned hanging over Qualis and the quality of housing repairs in the Epping Forest district. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I'm conscious that we didn't actually have a question in there, which of course this session is intended for. I don't know whether Councillor Helen Kay wishes to come back on that in the first instance.
Yes, what can I say? There wasn't a question as such, but what I will say is that I think in this instance we agree to disagree with Councillor Murray. I don't think it was appropriate, and I stand by my decision to discuss something that it is under investigation. But I promise him, and I think he has not only my promise, but I think everybody's promise that we will get to the bottom of it, and the truth will be given to everybody. And so that is one of my aims as well. As for Qualis, I conducted more or less the same, and I did mention it. You can watch it on webcast. And they took the message that the performance actually needs to be tightened up, to prioritise on, vulnerable people. And, I'm ever so sorry. I think you were a little bit upset and you didn't participate. I was very disappointed for that. But, that's what it is. Thank you.
And I am very conscious that this is a question session, and unless you've got an answer to give.
Thank you, Chairman, and I won't be shouty either. And what I would say is I do very much respect Councillor Murray's view on housing, and I know he's got a lot of experience in the area. And what I wanted to assure him is that as housing portfolio holder, I'll make sure that Qualis's performance is scrutinised. And I know we've had a number of conversations about this in the past. One point I just wanted to draw to members' attention is that there is a Qualis councillor's email. So if you do have any housing repair issues that a resident brings to your attention, please do use that. I believe that has been in the members' bulletin, but I'll make sure it is back in there. And I just wanted to note that I have been to the depot just a couple of weeks ago to meet with Qualis representatives, just to find out a bit more about how they take in the complaints. What I have said about in this chamber before about Qualis is we have seen a greater efficiency in terms of housing repairs, but obviously where we see concerns, we do need to act upon that and make sure the system is working properly. In the winter, when this meeting took place, there was a particular issue around boilers freezing, and there was a bit of a backlog caused by that. But I am keeping on top of Qualis, as will the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, to ensure the performance is up to scratch. Thank you.
Thank you. No more questions to Councillor Kane. So we receive that report. The item 16, joint arrangements for external organisations. Again, I don't think we've got any reports this evening. Councillor Janet Whitehouse.
Yes, I'm obviously not giving a report because I'm not a representative. Chairman, the members who serve in outside bodies are representatives of the Council. And when we discussed this at Constitution Working Group, we agreed it was important that Council heard what these bodies were doing. We're nearly at the end of the year, and there are a number of representatives who have not yet reported. I wondered if at the next Council meeting, those who have not reported could put reports in. Probably a short written report would be the easiest way. But they know if they've made a report or not. I won't list all the ones that haven't yet done it. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I can actually assure you that I will be bringing a report to the next meeting, well, not the one next week, but the next full council meeting from the Lee Valley Regional Park Authority. So, sorry, Councillor Pont.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to inquire as to the change of status in the Epping Forest District Museum, which has recently taken place. Does that mean it will now be an outside body for the purposes of this reporting item?
At this stage, I don't think that progress has gone far enough down the route to know what its status will be, but I think that is one to bear in mind, and it will come forward, I'm sure, at a later date. On that basis, then, we have no reason to exclude public and press, so I close the meeting at exactly 9 o'clock.